Well, welcome to the Military Wire with Mike Schindler. I am Mike Schindler, and this is the segment where we interview some of America's most elite men and women who have served this country in hopes that you, our listener, can gain an aha moment that you can apply to your own life. Before we get rocking and rolling, I got to put a shout out to our sponsor, Bone Frog Cellars and Bone Frog Coffee. These guys are amazing, founded by Lieutenant Commander Tim Cruikshank and his business partner, David Johnston. Portions of the proceeds of this coffee and wine go to the Navy SEAL Foundation to help support the families of fallen SEALs. So thank you. Be sure you check those guys out. And for those of you who are shoppers on Amazon, we ask that you just support us through OMF Community Outreach. Portions of those funds help support the training that we do for our men and women who transition back into the civilian sector. We help them identify a new mission, purpose, identity. So I got to tell you guys, the world seems like it is on fire. We go from crisis to crisis. If you're paying attention to anything out there, coming out of a pandemic, economic crisis, Israel seems to be in a little conflict with Hamas right now. Oftentimes, this has been going on for decades, but we don't know about it because we have shadow warriors that are taking care of this stuff before it emerges to the level of people paying attention. And I just want to say that today we have some great men on the show who I'm very excited for you guys to meet. Navy veterans Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson, international best-selling authors who are bringing light to these shadow warriors, these shadow heroes. They do it through their best-selling books. And I got to tell you, the Tier 1 series, if you guys have not, if you're not aware of this, you need to be aware of this. I have a couple of those books right back here that you guys can see, War Shadows, Collateral. There's a few others, but we're here to talk about their latest book, Sons of Valor. And I could keep going on, but before I do this, Brian and Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us, Mike. It's an honor to be here with you. And thank you for all the great work you're doing, man. We really appreciate it.
No, 100%. Well, I'm excited to dig in. First of all, I got to ask this question because our audience always wants to know the background of those who we have on the show. And I need you guys to explain how a Navy fast attack submariner and a Navy trauma vascular surgeon become best-selling authors. How did that even happen?
Well, our stories are a little different, so maybe I'll go first, and then Jeff can tell his.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that we definitely have in common, in addition to our service, is just a passion for storytelling. And me personally, even before I started putting words on the page, there was this ancient verbal storytelling tradition, and what I mean by that is on a fast attack submarine, we're doing all kinds of secret missions. And, there's some very exciting and white knuckle terrifying moments, but there's also long periods where you're just being stealthy. You're trying to hide. You're trying to not make noise. The submarine's cruising around at 5 knots, trying not to be detected. And so for a lot of the crew, there's not much going on, especially if you're in the engine room standing watch and you're not changing power. So there's long periods of time. And one of the ways when I was standing engineering watch officer to help pass the time is I would tell stories. And I remember, partway through my tour, some of the guys would say, "You're a pretty good storyteller. Have you ever thought about writing books?" And I hadn't given that thought at the time. But then later, after I got out of the military, and I thought about the men and women that I served with and some of these stressful but very earth-shattering moments that I had during my service, I wanted to find a way to really share that with other people. So that was sort of the genesis of my storytelling adventure.
Wow. So Jeff, you like this, and Brian, no disrespect, it's not that you're not a brainiac. Okay, submariners, I mean, are amazing, right? But then we got Jeff, who's like got this long laundry list of accomplishments that some people go, if I just accomplished one of these things, that'd be amazing. So you're like this trauma vascular surgeon, actor, did some stuff with the teams, the community. I don't know. I think maybe at one time you were running for president. That's not true, but how do you go from that to this?
So interestingly, my story is almost the exact opposite of Brian's. So you're right. I've done a lot of different things from, being with other branches of the government, going to medical school eventually. I was a pilot for a while. I've done lots of different things. My mom says I can't keep a job, so that's a mom. But unlike Brian, for me, the one thread was the writing. So I've been writing stories down since I can remember, since I was a little kid. My mom tells stories about me, like writing my own Star Trek episodes when I was 8 years old and stuff like that. And I actually published my first short story when I was just under 13 years old. And from that moment on, and it was in a nothing little magazine, type thing, but it sort of inspired me. And so as I went from career to career, as you mentioned, I've had a few of them. The one thread that always goes through my entire life is the writing. So I've been writing stories my whole life. It's the one thing I've always done, no matter what else I might have going on. I didn't really tackle full-length books, novels until much later in life. I think I thought I had too short of an attention span to do that. But what's interesting is that when you write a full-length novel, it's very liberating. You realize that when you're a short story writer, like I used to be, you think that that's easier, but it's actually not. Trying to tell a story in 7 or 8 pages and develop characters and story arc and all that is actually quite difficult. And so once I wrote my first book, there was no going back. It's a great way to tell stories. So unlike Brian, who came to it later, it's the thing that always has been sort of my ground, sort of my center, my foundation for all the other things I've done.
Wow. So how did you two meet then? I mean, what, you guys go to a storyteller convention? I mean, how did you guys combine?
That's exactly what we did, actually. Brian
right?
stalked me. Yeah, he was a bit of a stalker. And, what I remember, we were, all kidding aside, we were debut authors the same year at International Thriller Writers. And International Thriller Writers has a conference every year in New York called Thriller Fest, which is incredible. Credible network of writers, lots of military writers these days in writing in our genre. And so it was the first year I had attended, and Brian and I met there. And, I joke that he stalked me, but the truth is I sort of stalked him because I'm not comfortable in those settings. At this point in my life, I'd been doing a lot of other stuff, mostly in the military and other branches of the government. And I didn't want to hang out with a bunch of writers and drink wine, and I was very uncomfortable. And so I went through the little brochure thing, and I found all the people that were military veterans, and I sort of memorized their faces, and I looked for them so I could have someone to talk to. And so at the first cocktail party, I remember seeing Brian sitting alone, like most submariners, with a tear trickling down his chin, looking very awkward and uncomfortable. And so I went over out of pity and talked to him. All joking aside, I did approach him, and we became instant friends. Our kids are the same age. We're both very family focused people. Our faith is a big deal to us, and we just instantly hit it off. So that's how we met. And the writing together thing came a little bit later. Maybe I'll let Brian tell that part.
Yeah, let's hear about that, because so you guys come together and now you have this tier 1 series, right? So, maybe Brian, explain to folks that don't know what tier 1 is. Number one, I think that's important. Because again, those are oftentimes the shadow warriors that we talk about. But how did you guys come to say, okay, this is the genre and we're going to tell these stories? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think it's very fitting for your audience too, to sort of hear this story, because it matches up very nicely with the military ethos. And that's this idea of teamwork and collaboration. And, when like Jeff said, when we met, we were both writing solo. And, one of the things that writing solo, as exciting as it is to have complete control over this universe that you're creating, it's a very lonely occupation too. You're just sitting by yourself writing. And so when we sort of talked about or floated this idea of maybe collaborating on a series, there was some excitement right out of the gate. Well, okay, now we get to team up and bring Jeff's experiences and my experiences both to bear in this tier 1 story. And so not only, do you leverage your individual writing strengths, but there's this force multiplier effect. And we talk about that a lot. It's like those days when you go to the gym and you have to drag your butt out of bed and you just don't want to do it. And maybe sometimes you just don't go. But if you have a workout partner, a buddy who's going to be there, and you're going to let that guy down if you don't show up, you're more likely to show up.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of the same thing with us. Like, I don't want to let Jeff down. We've got our page count to hit. And we also have a really, really good time doing this. It's probably criminal how much fun we have doing this job. So, yeah, I think military folks can definitely relate to this idea of teamwork, collaboration, and wanting to sort of pull together, on a big project.
Yeah, so you guys took an idea and said, okay, we're going to pull together. So Jeff, explain what tier 1 is, and then so you guys pull together and then you begin to do character development, right? And I think the important part that I want people to know about is, moving from crisis to crisis is going to happen, right? I mean, regardless, that's going to happen. But what I love about this topic is we're all kind of the authors of our own story, right? How we deal with the crisis that we face, and crisis is judged differently in everybody's book, but is really up to us because we're the author of the story, right? The one thing we can't control is our mindset, so how we navigate through that. So not to get philosophical on this, but Jeff, go to number 1, what is tier 1? And number 2, developing the story and why these stories are so relevant to the reader, not just escapism, but what they can learn from them.
Absolutely, because that was part of the conversation that Brian and I had at the very beginning. First of all, to explain, in the military special operations world, when we refer to a tier 1 unit, we're talking about the Joint Special Operations Command, the JSOC units, that are the tier 1 ultra secret counterterrorism units. And so those are the real shadow warriors. So when we talk about Navy SEALs, when we talk about Green Berets, these are the elite Navy SEALs, elite Green Berets that make it to, the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Alpha, or to the JSOC SEAL team. And so when Brian and I talked, I had the honor of serving, with SEALs that were serving at that level. And so I knew these guys. These guys were brothers of mine. They were friends of mine. We deployed together. And Brian won't talk about it much, nor should he, but he worked on the very spooky side of his world too, doing ISR type stuff in some very denied areas, I think would be a gentle way to say it. And so we both had these experiences with real people working in these environments that are so popular in fiction. And so in the very beginning of this conversation, Brian and I decided, look, if we're going to write this type of universe, we're going to use it as a way to honor the men and the women that we served with that still serve out there at the pointy tip of the spear. So rather than writing the bulletproof superhero, type character, we wanted to write characters who are real and relatable, because those are the men and women that we worked with. I think the most extraordinary thing about special operations people, especially at the tier 1 level, is how ordinary they are. Like, we have this vision of these superheroes when we don't know these guys. And that's not who they are. These are guys that coach their little league. These are guys that pick up milk on their way home from the grocery store. They take the garbage can down to the curb for their wife when they're not deployed. All of those normal things. If you ran into them at Lowe's, you wouldn't go, oh, that's John Dempsey. You would have no idea who they are. And that was one of the most impressive things. So how do you take that and put it into a fiction work that is designed to be exciting? Well, you tell their story in a very realistic way, and you do it in a very character-driven way, where we get to know these people, care about them, care about their problems and their families and that sort of thing. And so that's what we set out to do from the very, very beginning. And so when you see our character from tier 1, John Dempsey, and some of the other characters, Dan Munn and even Kelso Jarvis, these characters truly are amalgams of many people that we've worked with, that we've served with. And we feel a real duty and a real responsibility to reflect those people and that community in a realistic way.
So what do you think the reading this, and I don't want to, I'll just say to our audience, I love the books. I mean, I chewed through them. I mean, as soon as I was done with one, I was picking up the other. They are engaging. There was interesting things that I would grab from each character, almost like a self-assessment to some degree. But what do you hope that your readers get from this? I mean, they're action-packed, they're thrilling, no question. but is there a deeper message through these stories for you guys?
Yeah, I think that there is. And you probably noticed, Mike, that the series is in this very politically charged time. The series is politically agnostic.
Yeah.
And I think we try to represent that element of service, which is, when I was serving, I was never asked by a commanding officer what my party affiliation was or what I thought on this issue or that. What mattered is that I was with my brothers. We had a mission to accomplish. And, we were all on the same boat and we're all rowing the same direction, right? And, that's because, administrations change, but the service and the mission to serve our country and uphold the Constitution, that is evergreen. So these characters represent that ethos, and that's important to Jeff and I to communicate that. And I think that the other thing is that all these characters have, a very strong moral compass. And, they're not prognosticating on, some pulpit, beating, other people into submission with their views. What they're doing is they're leading by example. And we show how difficult it is to lead by example, by the challenges and difficulties that they face through the course of the story. So yes, it's fiction, but I think that it makes it easy for the readers to invest in these characters because they see, oh my gosh, they're facing the same sorts of problems and moral dilemmas that I am, and this is how they deal with them.
Yeah, and that's a perfect answer. And I just want to add that, that moral ambiguity is a real thing. And that is one of the reasons that many, in fact, service members suffer with, PTS after service. It's not black and white. And of course, in the universe that we're describing, in the JSOC, ultra tier special operations world, even more so. You grow up watching the John Wayne movies and the bad guys are charging over the hill trying to kill you and you kill them back. That's pretty unambiguous. But in the real world, especially in special operations, there are a million shades of gray. And so we try to place our characters into these morally ambiguous settings where they have to make decisions to do the right thing. They have to be very intentional about honor and duty and country and what they represent. And that is something that's a challenge for real service members. And so that's what we're trying to put in these books. And it also makes it for a great character study and makes it for exciting fiction. But I just want to add one last thing, and that is that when we talk about writing realistically, obviously Brian and I have had the honor of being exposed to a great number of national secrets, and we take operational security extremely seriously. When you read our tier 1 books, you're reading a work of fiction. The realism that we're talking about isn't tactics and strategy and locations of units and all that. We fictionalize those things. And where we bring in the realism is the people, the relationships, and the way that they respond to their situations. And so it's really important to us that people know that, because we still have friends out there on the tip of the spear.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue too, Jeff. For the past 2 decades, we've been, at war essentially with jihadist people that have been working hell bent on taking us out, redefining America, etc. And your latest book, Sons of Valor, which is coming out here in June, correct? Coming out here in June of 2021. A great book. I will say, though, and I'm glad you clarified right before this is all fiction. However, this seemed so incredibly possible, very real. I don't want to give away the plot, but I think every year we see the enemy get smarter, right? What was interesting about this latest book is how they even defined enemy and terrorist, which was caused me to pause too, right? That our perception and our perspective really kind of frames our definition of the other person as well. So there was so much in this book, but I want to open it up, and Brian, maybe we start with you on this Sons of Valor. How did you guys come up with this topic? Because it seems like it's ripped from the headlines, and suddenly I'm, thinking, Oh boy, could this not actually be happening?
Jeff and I are always communicating. We're always talking. We like to stay very current on geopolitics. And I think as fiction writers and just students of the human condition, it's hard not to watch what's going on around the world and try to, humanize and put yourself in all the stakeholders' positions. I think that makes us good at our job if we can do that. And one of the things that we realized over just the course of writing the Tier 1 series too is that this conflict is a 2-decade long conflict, like you said, Mike. And you're very astute to pick up on this theme, which is that we're the second generation of warfighters. They have a completely different view of this conflict than their parents. You have active duty soldiers, young enlisted soldiers who might have been infants at the time that the towers fell. They didn't observe that. They didn't see that happen. So what's different now than it was, in 9/11? What's different is it's become a generational conflict. And so both sides of this conflict, the American and coalition service members, but also the indigenous people and the terrorists, these folks have all grown up with this. Tactics and methods have changed. And so that's sort of this kernel. Now, this is where I'll pass it over to Jeff. I think this kernel of, okay, what if, our opposition, keyed into something and change their tactics?
Right. And I think that, I agree completely. We always start all of our stuff with sort of the what if. And, just as a little quick background, if you haven't read the Tier 1 books, in the Tier 1 books at the very beginning, the entire JSOC SEAL team gets wiped out in an attack because of faulty intelligence and some leaking of intelligence. And our main character, John Dempsey, is presumed dead and given a new identity to go do what he does with Team Ember. And it's all very exciting, deep, dark, covert stuff. But that brings the inevitable question, well, what if that really happened? And of course, we pray it never would. But if it did, they would have to stand up a new SEAL team to take over that role. And this would be the first time since, the JSOC units started that a team had to be stood up from nothing, where there's not just new members coming in and being mentored by senior members who have been in that unit for a decade, et cetera. Everyone's a newbie, everybody's green team. What would that be like? So that was the first question that we asked. And we have this fan favorite character, minor character from the Tier 1 books in Chunk Redman and his SEALs that we were able to put into this new role. But as we developed that and started to think, okay, what kind of a situation we're going to put him in, that's when we started talking about what Brian is talking about, which is it's not just our fighters that are new generation, right? It's not, some of these guys are sons of SEALs who responded after 9/11. But we have this new generation of antagonists, these new jihadists, and they're not like their fathers and their grandfathers. They're more fluent in multiple languages. They're more educated. They're more technologically savvy. They use social media to their advantage. And so during our initial conversation, that's when we said, well, what if this asymmetric battlefield that has been created over 20 years, where we're using high-tech satellites and drones and dropping things from drones onto basically sheep herders living in the mountains of the Hindu Kush, what if that got flipped on its head? What if this new generation is savvy enough to sort of embrace technology in the way that we do and turn it against us? And I don't want to give too much of the plot away, but that's what happens here. So you have this new generation of jihadists who are fighting a whole different type of war, and we have our special operators who have to adapt and overcome in order to protect American interests abroad. So it was really fun and exciting to do the sort of what if stuff, for sure.
Well, I can certainly see these things, your books being turned into a series. I think, many of us remember, the Unit, loved that series. I could see this, piggybacking on that even more. What I found so compelling is, back in the day, 12 strong, our idea of, going to the caves is, well, we got to do this on horseback now, right? And now you guys have even taken that script and flipped it again and saying, wait, now we're fighting a whole different battle. And which led me to the question is, without America becoming isolationist, how do we how do we safeguard America? Like if Sons of Valor came true, okay, how do we protect against that? Because if we're thinking it, I always think if we're thinking it, I'm sure they're thinking it. So how do we combat that?
Yeah, and everybody wants to answer that question through a political lens, and we don't do that, as you
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
because we're military guys, and it doesn't matter who is in charge. What matters is keeping America safe, and what is necessary to do that is a robust intelligence service who are serving the national interest. We have to have people over there of infrastructure so that we can conduct operations, and until the bad guys are ready to stop trying to kill us all, and until their goal is no longer to wipe us off the face of the earth, to not have a presence, like you said, isolationist, that just simply won't work. I mean, that's from 100 years ago. We can't be isolationists if they are trying to kill us or destroy our interests abroad. And so it requires a robust special operations community of tier 1 operators, but it must also be supported by a robust intelligence service. And that's why we play into our books. You know, the Office of the DNI is involved and the Counterterrorism Center is involved. And we show this joint world that we live in. You know, Ember Team and John Dempsey aren't in a vacuum. They're supported by a myriad of people. And we do the same thing with Sons of Valor. We try to show that broad integrated service that's required to keep America safe.
That's so cool. So the Sons of Valor comes out this June, okay, June of 2021. Very exciting. How do people get a hold of it? I'm sure they can get it anywhere, but what is the best method, way, etc., how to do that?
The book is available in multiple formats. So let me start with that.
Yep.
You can get a paper copy if you want. You can get the ebook, but it's also available as an audiobook. So we have a great narrator named Ray Porter, who's a superstar. So for those of you who like to listen to audiobooks, you can download the book through Audible, or you can go to Amazon and get any of the formats there. But it's also available at your local independent bookseller. We encourage people to support our local independent booksellers because these folks love books and they want to talk about books, and they're there in your community, especially as we come out of this pandemic. These bookstores have really struggled through the pandemic. So please, if you're going to buy a copy, we encourage you to look for your local independent bookseller. I mean, Jeff, maybe we talk about the event at Mysterious Galaxy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, Brian, like Brian said, you can get these books anywhere. We love to support our independent bookstores. But you can get information on our website. It's www.andrews-wilson.com. And we have links to any venue that you might want to buy it at. But June 9th is our launch event. The book releases June 8th, but we're actually having a virtual event. We're hoping this is the last in the generation of virtual events. But we've set up a virtual event with Mysterious Galaxy Books out in California. It's a virtual event we're doing in conversation with a very good friend, former Army Apache helicopter pilot and FBI agent Don Bentley, who's another thriller writer, writing in the Jack Ryan series. He's got a book coming out actually the same day. So we found that out. We thought, oh, it'd be so much fun to do it together. So June 9th, Mysterious Galaxy. If you search them, you can go to their website, or there's links on ours. And you can sign up for this virtual event. We signed hundreds and hundreds of book plates to be put into books. So even though it's virtual, you can still order autographed copies of the book. So that's a great way to kick the series off. Anybody that wants to see us and Don, or actually it'd probably be me and Don ganging up on Brian. I think that's what we agree. But whatever it is, we'd love to have people there. We're going to be able to answer questions and engage readers. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's a fun way to kick this off.
That is so great. That's so great. So I asked this question pretty much of all our audience, of all our guests, so that they could share with our audience. If there was one thing that you think our audience can do to help keep America strong, what is it?
I think that, you know, we've heard this. This is my one political thing I will say. We always hear the expression, you know, reach across the aisle. Yeah. And I think maybe now we need to just pretend there's not an aisle, right? Because out in our communities, our neighborhoods, there is no aisle to reach across. You know, we are all neighbors. And I think, you know, you opened the show, Mike, you talked about this idea of isolationism, the America under threat. And I think, you know, we have more we have cyber intrusions, we have all kinds, we have the pandemic, we have all kinds of pressures internationally, environmentally, politically. So we really, really do need to come together as a nation, because, if we're inwardly focused, it means that we're paying less attention to the external threats. So let's not try to reach across the aisle. Let's erase the aisle and just remember that we're all Americans. We're in this together.
Yeah, love that. Jeff, what about you?
First of all, very well said. I couldn't agree more. We've got to stop letting fringe elements on both sides of the aisle separate us and make us hate one another, because then we're not paying attention to the real enemy. So I agree with everything Brian said. We have to start accepting one another, loving one another as God loves us, as brothers and sisters and Americans. And the other thing is, support your military. What does that mean for the average citizen? You say that and they don't really know what that means. Like, oh, say thank you at the airport. Yeah, those things matter, but you need to stand up and demand to be safe. You need to stand up and say, we want a strong military. We want a robust intelligence service. We want these things to keep us safe. These are not partisan issues. I will tell you that in the military and in other government agencies I've served in, there is already extreme diversity in political thought, in ethnicity, and culture, but everyone there has one thing in common: they love America. So if we can all start to love America, love one another, and support our military and intelligence services, that's how we'll stay safe.
Yeah, I love that whole idea, the one team, one fight. I oftentimes sign all my emails that way: one team, one fight. I really want people to buy into that. And as you guys know, I've always said the strength of this country really starts with the family. When we start treating our family right, we begin to treat other people right. I mean, it's just, we begin to fall in love with the family. We begin to fall in love with other people's families. We start to see through that lens. So I love what you guys said. So to our audience, you guys got to check these guys out. Brian and Jeff are amazing. Their books are off the charts. Great. As you guys know, we've had many great authors on here. I can't pick favorites, but I will just say that there will never be a moment I don't read one of their books. It is so good. Be sure you check out the event that's coming up for those guys on June 9th. Be sure that you go to their website and visit that, andrewswilson.com. And gentlemen, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having us, Mike. What a great time. And thanks for all you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those of you that want to learn more about how to get back on mission and purpose, be sure to check us out at Operation Military Family. And be sure you pick up this latest book, Sons of Valor. Don't delay. Get it today. Well, you can't get it today, but be on the list to get it. So you can get it soon, but get it when you can get it. So gentlemen, again, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.